failure to me is letting people down, especially
Very
people that I made a promise to or feel like I made a promise to. I'm like, yeah, there's a bunch of people I let down, a bunch, and it's
Mhm.
the thing about them daily. It
Yeah.
just depends on the day. But there's a ton of people that I wish I could have done more for and more with. There's a ton of people that I mismanaged and I just didn't do well by them. Some intentionally, some unintentionally. Some I only realized in hindsight, some I realized in the moment. With that many people who have come through under my care, it's my company. There's a bunch of people that I'm sure hate my guts right now. There's a bunch of people that have said to me that being part of Super Friendly has changed their lives. There's a bunch of people that have not said to me, but probably were like, that dude is trash.
Mm,
And so just with that many people coming through, there's bound to be a lot of that. And
of
I
course.
I don't regret, any of them, but I'm sad about every single one.
Welcome back to Swirl Radio. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm Aika. At Swirl Radio, we stand for those who messed up, ruined relationships,
Bombed a grade, said the wrong thing, lost the ideal client.
overpromised, underdelivered, showed up late, and missed their shot.
Today, we brought you someone who built a design agency, ran it for over a decade, then made a decision to shut it down. Not because it failed in the traditional sense, but because it stopped being the thing he wanted it to be.
Because sometimes the hardest pivot isn't starting something new, it's walking away from the thing that's been working.
We're excited to welcome someone who discovered design through a pirated copy of Photoshop at 12, built an agency called SuperFriendly, grew it over a decade working with brands like Google and Crayola, sold it, now runs Make More Money, a coaching program helping freelancers and agency owners scale their business from $1 million and beyond. Welcome, Dan Ma. Tell us a
Awesome.
little bit about yourself, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I am a husband and a father and a designer and a creative director and an entrepreneur. I live just outside of Philly. I like to play basketball badly a couple times a week, and just trying to design the kind of life that I want to live with my family and the people that I love.
What basketball badly? Why badly?
I've been playing since I was, 4 years old. So for playing that many years, I definitely should be better than I am now. If you played with me, you'd be like, yeah, you probably should be better than than you are. But I enjoy it, so I try to play as much as I can.
Hey, that's a good thing. Keeps us in shape.
Yeah, exactly. Just get my steps in.
Exactly. So, Dan, everyone that comes onto our show here, I ask the same question. So I'm going to direct this to you first. On LinkedIn, all professionals are usually on LinkedIn because we market ourselves in different ways. So I ask you this. If LinkedIn disappeared tomorrow and we all had to reintroduce ourselves without the titles, without the resumes, I would like to know, what would you lead with? And what would you want to know about someone else?
That's a good question. That's a deep question. I like that. I appreciate that. If I had to introduce myself without LinkedIn, without the bios and the profiles and the and all that kind of stuff, I think I would still say that I'm a designer, but I would mean that not in a specific way about making web designs or UI designs, even though I do that. I think designers are people who look at the world, observe things that could be better, that they think they could make better, and try to do it. So I identify with that as an identity, not just a role or not just a job. So I think that's how I would introduce myself, and then I would probably want to introduce myself that way to start a conversation with people about what they want to see in the world that they think could be better, and maybe things that they could have an impact on in making them better or being involved in it.
I love that. I have a buddy, he's an engineer, and I keep telling him he's a creative, he's a designer, but he doesn't want to roll with it. He's like, "You're the designer."
Because designer, it means a specific thing. I think that's, I kind of lament that a bit. It means a specific thing when it comes to jobs, but I think that anybody can be a designer. My kids are designers. I've seen lots of kids be good designers. I think accountants are designers.
Mhm.
So I mean it in a much more broad sense, even though it does mean a specific thing too. So it's tough when words mean multiple things.
And then you have different languages, and they mean like you have like words that don't even exist in English. It's crazy.
Totally. I'm the more I read about languages like Latin or German has like a lot of concepts that we just don't even have as English words. And so I'm like, yeah, we definitely missed a lot in the English language.
Yeah, I have this friend who's from Korea, and she told me there's this word called Han that actually means generational kind of bitterness.
Wow.
It really got me thinking, like it kind of, if you have sort of a problem with someone, you pass it down to your kids and they have that same problem with someone. It's Han.
That's deep. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
All right. So then we're gonna go back. I want to go back. I want to go to like childhood because I read a little bit about you, and I'm not like Ika. I know she lives and breathes that design world. My background is the heavy hardcore infrastructure tech end, right? I'm a designer too because I helped design that infrastructure, so
That's right.
I'm definitely a designer. But I read that your parents came from Pakistan and the Philippines. I wanted to know what was that household like growing up? Things like what was dinner like? What was the conversations about?
Yeah. What was dinner like? That's a good question. It's extra complicated because my grandparents also lived with us growing up. So between my parents, my dad's from Pakistan and my mom's from the Philippines. So they spoke English. They met in New York when they both came from their countries, spoke English. So at home, I grew up speaking English with my parents and with my brother because my parents couldn't understand each other in their native languages. But my mom's parents lived with us, and they were from the Philippines, so they spoke Tagalog and different dialects of the Philippines. So I would hear some Tagalog growing up with them. I would also hear a lot of English, from my parents as well, and with my brother. So dinner was always mixed. Sometimes it was Pakistani food, sometimes it was Filipino food, sometimes it was
Mm,
burgers and fries. So it was pretty mixed. It was like a potluck all the time.
yeah.
But when I will say, even growing up, like as I got older and invited friends over to the house, they would always like coming over when my mom would cook Filipino food or my dad would cook Pakistani food. So anytime we had that kind of food, um, my friends liked it more.
Did you have a favorite? Like, was there a staple that you
A couple. So like most Filipinos do, my mom cooks amazing chicken adobo. Which is if you
Mm.
haven't had it, it's like a sour, vinegary chicken and like a brown sauce. Got brown. It's amazing, really good. And then I also really like lumpia, which is a Filipino egg roll,
Mhm.
which sometimes can come vegetarian or can come with meat like beef or pork. Those are my two favorites. Anytime my mom will cook, I'll ask for those two things.
Did you learn any cooking growing up?
Not growing up, only as an adult. I've only in the last like maybe 5 to 10 years I've started to learn how to cook. I learned how to use DoorDash. I learned how to order a lot, but only the last couple of years and like having to like feed my family is like, all right, I got to learn how to
Right.
cook at some point. So
Right.
yeah, only recently have I learned how to cook some of this. I still don't know how to make lumpia properly, but I can make a chicken adobo at least.
I wanted to dig a little deeper in like the cultural aspect of growing up with sort of two completely polarized traditions. Was there anything that you really kind of felt connected to or anything that defined you?
Mm, um, yeah, interesting. I think what defined me was not being defined by either of those two things.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So like I never really identified as Pakistani even though I did, and I never really identified as Filipino even though I did, because I was always other to the other one. So I remember when I was 4 visiting the Philippines, and I went with just my mom. My dad was meeting us there. So I was there for I think 2 weeks with my mom, and I remember riding the jeepney in the Philippines and people pointing at me and calling me Mumbai to say like, "Oh, that kid is from Bombay," which is Mumbai now. Like that's an
Mhm.
Oh,
Indian kid. I'm like,
Right.
I'm from this place. This is my heritage, but I'm other. I'm the other thing here. And similar things elsewhere. So one thing that I really identify with now, especially as a strength, is that my parents kind of broke their norm. Like, culturally, most Pakistani people marry other Pakistani people. Most Filipino
mhm.
people marry other Filipino people. But the fact that a Pakistani married a Filipino, it's like they broke their cultural norm to do something unique. For better or worse, I felt very unique my whole life because of that. And I think a lot of that came from my heritage, from what my parents did in honoring certain parts of their traditions and then doing their own thing when it comes to traditions. And so I'm very encouraged in the way that I work with my family now is, we make a lot of our own traditions because we are a very mixed family. And I think that a lot of that started for me with my parents.
Oh, I love that. I can very much relate. I'm definitely feel like a third culture, Russian immigrants, but not really feeling Russian. And, one thing I wanted to touch on is your creative sort of side, your sketching and your drawing. The typical immigrant almost doesn't matter from where, doesn't really understand. So I was curious, what was that relationship like with your family and your drawing?
Yeah, so I used to draw all the time. I would carry a sketchbook around with me since I was, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old. And again, I think one of the things that came from my parents is like because they did something so non-traditional in marrying each other, I think they sort of lost the ability to make the excuse that like you got to do this whatever traditional thing. So typically, Asian households, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer or one of those like a proper profession. But they sort of couldn't make that argument. They couldn't say like you got to do the traditional thing because they didn't do the traditional thing, so they couldn't really
Right.
use that. So for me, I never had any pressure, even though my mom was a nurse and my dad was an accountant, or two, pretty traditional professions. I never had any pressure from either of them, at least that I remember, to like be an accountant or be a doctor or be a lawyer or be a nurse or anything like that. The most that I got was I remember even when I was like 8 or 9 years old, my dad, very practical, saying like, whatever you want to do when you grow up, just make sure that if you plan to have a family, that you can take care of your family. I'm like, all right, I think that's pretty good advice.
That's cool. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
solid,
solid.
but no judgment on like, hey, if that's art or if that's music. I played the piano growing up all the time.
Mhm.
So it's like whatever that is, if you plan to have a family, just make sure you can take care of your family. Like, all right. So that stuck with me for a long time.
I love that. But I'm curious, what about your friends? Like, what was your friend group like? Or did you have friends back then?
I did have friends. Most of them were centered around basketball. So
Okay.
growing up in North Philly, I would come home from school, watch a cartoon or two while having a snack, and then go outside and play basketball until it was time to go to bed. So on my block in North Philly, next door were two of my Portuguese neighbors, and then on the other side were three of my black neighbors, and then down the street was one of my white neighbors, and so like it was a very mixed culture. And I think it's similar to how some people who grow up poor, a lot of them say like we didn't even know we were poor, until later on somebody points out to you, you like only something else kind of points out to you like, oh wait, I'm different in this way. So I think for me it was the same thing. It was like I didn't know that I lived in a mixed culture neighborhood,
Right.
until later on going to other neighborhoods and being like, oh, they're not like this. Oh, I guess what I have is very different then. So for me it was just like growing up was growing up, and so it
Right.
just felt normal.
So aside from that basketball, you carried that sketchbook, right? In the early ages, you carried that sketchbook, and I'm curious to know what were you drawing? What was the themes, the characters? What kept showing up for you?
Yeah. So a couple of things just kind of rotated in and out, and then one definitely constant. So the in and out was like either cartoons or things that I watched a lot. So lots of Ninja Turtles, Thundercats, Dragon Ball
Yeah.
Z, stuff like that.
Right.
I'm growing up in the late '80s and early '90s. Lots of basketball stuff, drawing Michael Jordan and drawing sneakers and stuff like that. But the one that I always drew, my favorite, was Superman. When I
Mm.
was 3, I think I was the first time I watched the Richard Donner original Superman movie, the Superman one, Christopher Reeve. I can
Yeah.
recite that movie word for word, beginning to end. And
Wow.
I used to go around to people when I was 3 or 4 years old, and I used to say to them, if they would ask me, "How old are you?" I would say, "I'm over 21." Because that's a line that Christopher Reeve says in the movie
Yes,
when someone
yes.
interviews him, and he doesn't want to reveal his age. He's, "I'm over 21." So I used to say that a lot. I love drawing Superman. I used to have Superman comic books. Right behind me, I have the
Yeah.
first comic book I ever read. I have it in a frame back there. It was
Wow.
always Superman. Superman was my
Superman.
favorite. It continues to be to this day. I love everything about Superman.
Oh, I'm big on the comic books and the cartoons, but that's DC. I'm more of a Marvel guy.
Get it, I get it, yeah, yeah. I mean, Marvel,
But
especially the MCU, they've been doing a lot of really good stuff the last decade or so I can't hate.
yes, they have. Yes, they have. I mean, only DC character for me was Batman. I just like, hey, he's rich, but he's a human, and I feel like I can do everything he can because he's a human being. So I felt that it was something great.
Totally, I get that appeal. That's Batman is appeals to people in that way. What I liked about Superman is the opposite, which is that, like, I don't wanna read human stories, I wanna read superhuman stories. I wanna
Mm,
read
Oh,
stories about galaxies and universes and punching the sun and, stuff like that. Stuff
yeah,
that's I can't get anywhere else, and that's the thing that I really loved about comic books, especially the things that were universal scale, galactic scale, on that level. I really love that
yeah.
stuff.
You had a great imagination. But you mentioned basketball. You play basketball, came up playing basketball. I play basketball. Basketball to some people means, a lot. It was a connection for me with the people that I played with. And so I'm just curious, what was the love like for you? Why basketball? Like you did all this art stuff, but basketball stayed. Why?
I think part of it is deep and part of it is shallow. I think the shallow part is like, like every kid, you grow up about you dream about becoming a celebrity. That's of some
Right.
kind, right? It's like
Right.
celebrities have glamour and they have fame and they get to do all this stuff and they're rich and they have money and they have cars and so part of it is that for sure is like, oh, if I could be in the NBA one day. I mean, those dreams were squashed very, very early because I'm a short person. I'm 5'8", as a grown man, and
Oh,
as a kid, I was always smaller than everybody else, like
Yeah.
less weight and also just shorter. So it's like, all right, I'm not really going to be I'm not blessed with the gifts of genetics in the way that NBA players are. So that's not going to be the thing. Um, but one of the things I really liked about basketball is that in basketball, everybody has a role. I don't know that I could have said that, growing up. It was just instinctual. But now, um, have you ever read the book or seen the book? I just came across it and read it recently. It's called How Basketball Can Save the World.
no.
Wow. No, I
Oh, it's
haven't.
Uh,
excellent. It's by David, I forget his David Holland or something like that. I read it recently, and it basically makes an argument for how the dynamics of basketball can help solve things like world hunger and world peace. And it's like, wow, come on now. And then I was reading through it, it's like, actually, he's not wrong. Because in basketball, unlike other sports like football, in football there's an offense, and then offense comes off the field, and then defense comes onto the
Right.
field. But in basketball, you play both, right? On basketball,
Yes.
and on one possession your offense, on another possession your defense, and you have to seamlessly transition. So the idea of positionlessness is an
mhm,
important thing, which is like, well, I've run teams before, and the idea of positionlessness is actually a great asset to any team. When a player can play multiple positions, that's an important thing in a team dynamic, regardless of sports or work or whatever that thing is. Um, Short people can succeed in basketball, as can tall people. Most people in playing basketball are tall, and so they have
Mhm.
advantages. But there are short people who can play basketball.
Yes.
Fast people are good at basketball. Slow people are good at basketball. Big
Yes.
people are good at basketball. Small people are good. Like, you can be any shape, size, configuration, and you can be good at basketball if you figure out how to work with other people well. And
Right.
that was one of the things that book really pointed out, is like, it's really about chemistry and dynamic and collaboration, which to me is like, that's a good parallel for a lot of things in life. So I
Yes.
think I enjoyed all that stuff about basketball. Again, I couldn't articulate that as a 10-year-old, or an 8
Yeah,
year
of
old.
course.
I just like being able to shoot the ball and it goes in the hoop sometimes. I like being able to cross people over. I like being able to do a fancy play. And I like that stuff now. But I think there's a lot of stuff about just collaboration and like how you work with people. I played in a league for the last 5 years, a local league. I was
mhm.
talking to one of the guys recently in the league, and he was saying like, we played in this league for 4 or 5 years already. We don't know each other's last names, and it's like, right. But I could tell you about the people on the basketball court. I could tell you that that person's generous, or that
Mhm.
person is a leader, or that, like, just by playing basketball with them. So I think there's a lot of stuff that comes from sports, that I really enjoyed, like, now being a person who like analyzes those kinds of things and enjoys studying it and that stuff. I can articulate why that is. I think a lot of that was there from when I was a kid.
That's really interesting because I watched Eric, and now it kind of makes sense because he manages to go into different rooms, and everybody kind of he knows how to talk to people. I struggle with that. Maybe it's basketball.
Sports.
Seriously, join a pickup league. You'll learn how to talk to people. You'll learn how to be
Yeah.
included or excluded very quickly.
Yeah. Real quick.
So for me, it's like, in basketball, there's a thing called the eye test, right? Like, Eric, you know about it. The eye test means like you can look at somebody and be like, they're a basketball player, and then you can look at
Right.
some people and you can be like, they're not a basketball player. I
Mhm,
don't pass the eye test, right? So like, I walk into a room and I have to be like, the way that I join a basketball team is I will be the first person to pick up a broom and sweep
mhm.
the court. Because you know what? People be like, well, at least we could bring that guy because he'll sweep the court. Okay, now I'm
Oh,
included,
interesting.
because nobody's going to pick me first. I've never been picked first. I'm not good enough. I don't pass the eye test, right? So it's like, I got to figure out some way to be useful to this team. The way that I play is I'm a pass first point guard. I don't shoot very well, so I pass. I'm a good passer. So it's like, if I can get people open and I can help them score, they're going to want me on their team more. So like, all those dynamics, like, you figure out on the basketball court pretty quickly.
That's really interesting. Our podcast very much we're focused on the dumps, and I wanted to kind of jump into that. What's the earliest failure you remember that kind of shaped you? Not necessarily a career, but something that really stuck with you till today.
I have a couple of things, and I have kind of I don't know how to interpret failure. I don't really know what that means, and
Right.
maybe that's an advantage, but like, I don't really know what failure is. Like, are there things that I've messed up? For sure, definitely, and I'll tell you stories about that in a minute. And but I don't know what I would consider a failure. I guess maybe I just wasn't raised to think about it, that way. Is like, you try stuff and some stuff works and some stuff doesn't. Is it a failure? I don't know. I feel like that's a level of judgment that I'm uncomfortable with about myself or anybody else. So I'm
Mhm.
like, somebody else will sort that out later. I don't know. When I go to heaven or whatever, like maybe that'll be sorted out then. Until
Yeah.
then, it's like I'm just gonna try stuff that I think I can do and see if I can do and see if it works and see if it doesn't. So definitely had a lot of that stuff as a kid, stuff that I tried that didn't work, stuff that I tried
Mhm.
that did work. I remember this one time I was in school. I went to a small Christian school,
Mhm.
and I was in the Bible committee, which is
Mhm.
kind of our version of the like kind of like student officers, right? We had that
Oh,
too, but
wow.
we also had like the
Mhm.
Bible committee, which is like the group of students that was in charge of making sure that everybody learned more about the Bible in a exciting way. And I remember I planned a scavenger hunt. And I was like, it's going to be so cool. It's going to like be based on Bible verses and there's going to be clues in it and it's going to be hidden all over the room and the school and people would have to find. I was so excited about this. And it was like, it was like from the movies that I'd watched and the cartoons that I watched. I was so excited about it. And I did the scavenger hunt. I like led this thing. And everyone at the end was like, that was so terrible and so corny. And I was like, I was crushed. I was like,
Oh, man.
I thought it was gonna be so cool, and everyone was like, "That sucked." And like, it was the first time that I couldn't stop myself, but I cried in front of the whole class, which is like, as a fifth grader, you don't want
Oh,
to cry
wow.
in front of the whole
Right.
class. You're 10 years
Right.
old, like, oh, it's the worst. I cried in front of the whole class, and I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed about like a thing that I thought was going to be so cool, and up until that moment, until everybody was like, "This sucked." Still thought it was cool. Um,
Yeah.
and there's something about like I wanted to plan something for everyone that would make everybody feel included and was smart and also like allowed me to exercise my skills in a way that I could like, and it was a total bust. So that, to
Wow.
this day, that still sticks with me for sure. I have a couple of those like that, but that's definitely one of them.
Before we jump into kind of the a little bit further into the future, you met your wife in 4th grade?
Fifth grade, actually, yeah, she was
So
part of
did
the.
was
I don't
she
know if she was on
there?
the Bible committee. She probably was there. Yes, yep.
Oh my, so she saw you cry?
I'm sure
Oh
she
god.
did. I'll
So
ask her afterwards, yeah, if she remembers that. I don't know if she remembers that.
think it's interesting because you mentioned that she's your best creative director, and
Oh, yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about your history with working together, or
Yeah, sure. We met in fifth grade. Like I said, we went to a small Christian school. There were I think, probably about 15 of us in our fifth grade class. When we moved up to sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. In eighth grade, there were 7 of us in our eighth grade class. A very
Mhm.
small school. So actually, my wife and I, we used to date each other's best friends. Whatever
Oh,
dating means
yeah.
at eighth grade, right? At
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
but we always used to hang out in a group of friends. And what we eventually realized that like we actually got along better than anybody else, because I think we just see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. We have a lot of things that complement each other in terms of our upbringing, in terms of our way of looking at the world. Again, things that we know now. Having been married for almost 20 years, we couldn't have articulated that back then. I think we just
Mhm.
had chemistry, in that way. And so, my wife is not a trained designer or anything like that, but because we've known each other for so long, as I went to school for design, as I learned design as a profession, she's been with me the whole time. We were dating and then got engaged and then got married. So I show all of my stuff to her and she is brutal sometimes. That's what I mean about like being my best creative director. She just calls me on my stuff when it's not up to snuff. She also compliments me well when it does, when my work is good. She's like, babe, this is really good. So she's always honest with me and I can always trust her to give me honest feedback that really pushes me, in the work, even though she doesn't have a trained background as a designer or anything like that. So she's super creative in what she does. We've tried to work together in different ways. It's sometimes it hasn't worked out. Sometimes it's like we're just in the wrong spots or the wrong seats. And then the latest time that we tried to work together, we actually worked. We started a company together, which was
Oh,
cool.
you
Kind of put
did?
both of us in our genius zones.
Yeah.
So we've just tried to collaborate in many different ways. We collaborate as romantic partners and as parents and as coworkers and as peers and as friends and all that kind of stuff. Collaborated as sports rivals. We play racquetball,
Oh, wow.
less often than we want to now. I think we don't really fight very much, except when we play racquetball.
Oh,
Racquetball
Oh
wow.
is when
wow.
we like scream at the top of our lungs at each other. and then we go have lunch together afterwards.
Hey,
That's
that's cool.
funny. Wait, racket, is that the one when you're in the room and you're hitting it? Oh my god, yeah, that
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah,
That
I would get
that
mad
that ball
too.
comes pretty fast. That's that's
Oh, it's
that's
fun.
good stuff.
So she's an excellent racquetball player. I'm not, but
Oh,
I'm
oh,
more
wow.
athletic. So it's like I've got like general athletic ability, but she's actually a good racquetball player. So it's a good match because she can hit the ball wherever she wants to hit the ball, but I can run fast enough in a little room that I can get to it no matter what. So it's good battles.
Give us a little bit of a journey from like drawing in your sketchbook to getting that first job to starting your own business, just like a little kind of recap of that.
Cool. So when I was 10, I think 1995 or 94, Toy Story came out,
Oh yeah.
and I
Yeah,
watched
yeah.
Toy Story, and I was like, "What? This is incredible! People get paid to do this, to make this. Like, this is awesome. I want to get paid to do this. Like, that's the job that I want to have." So my dream shifted from like maybe comic book artist, maybe cartoonist, maybe something like that to like, I want to be a 3D animator. So that was
Nice.
the thing that I saw. As like, how do I become a 3D animator? I remember we would take one vacation every 2 or 3 years. And my parents would drive. We'd load up the minivan. We'd load up the cooler with sandwiches and whatever. And we would drive from Philly to Orlando. And we would go to Disney World every 3 years. It was the only vacation that we took. And I remember going to Disney World, specifically MGM Studios at the time. It wasn't even it wasn't a ride. It was just the animator studio. And you
Mhm.
could stand in the window and just watch them draw. And that's what I would do that for like 3 hours. My parents were like, "You don't want to ride any rides?" I'm like, "Nope."
Oh
I just
wow.
watched them draw the Lion King or whatever it was that they were doing. And it was so cool to me that was like, okay, like I would love to do this, get paid to do this and do this all the time. I would love to do that. So I wanted to be a 3D animator. So from 10 on, it was like, what do I need to learn? I got to learn how to use computers, I guess. I got to learn what software do people use? Well, how do they animate on a computer? And I got a pirated copy of Photoshop, and then pirated copy of Flash, and then a pirated copy of 3D Studio Max and Blender and ZBrush and all these kinds of things. And like, all right, I'll just learn this stuff. And I started to read magazines, in the bookstore when I could afford them. So I eventually went to school for 3D animation because I was like, that's what I want to do. And had my first class officially, 3D animation, and I sucked at it. It was really bad
Hard.
because it's hard. And nobody said it was
Yeah.
hard. Nobody told me that part. I thought you just like, you like it and you're good at it, and then you do it. And it's like, oh, but the hard part, that part, no one
You
says about that.
jumped you jumped right into 3D? You didn't do any like 2D first?
I mean, I did a little bit of Flash stuff here and there.
Oh, okay, okay. So you had
I made some flip books as a kid, like that kind of stuff. But it was like, oh, we're doing this for real because it's college
okay.
now. So 3D animation class, I sucked at it. I spent 12 weeks making a wheel, in our first 3D modeling class, and I was like, oh, come on. And it didn't help that all the other kids in my class were so good. Like all of their projects were like incredible, and I'm like, I guess I just suck at it.
Mm.
It actually turns out that yes, I did suck at it, but also everybody else in my class were actually really awesome at it. All of them are like lighting supervisors at Pixar now. Like, oh, like they're doing stuff
Oh
like that. They are
wow.
actually incredible, and doing one of them's a Disney Imagineer, it's like they actually were and are incredible at it. And in contrast, looked like I sucked even more. But I
Mm.
was lucky that at the time, the program that I went to school for is called digital media. And it was
Mhm.
only half of a 3D animation program. The other half was interactive design, which I didn't know what design was at the time. I didn't know that design was a field you can go into. Um, I only figured it out by leafing through the course catalog and being like, I got to take all these classes. What's visual communication? What's typography? What's all this stuff? And I learned that design was a profession in school. And as I took those classes, I was like, I'm actually pretty good at this stuff, and I like it. I enjoy it.
Mm.
So that kind of started my transition from being like 3D animator hopeful to designer, interactive designer. And we were learning stuff at the time where it was coming out and it was changing and it was exciting. We were learning Flash and Director and HTML and CSS, like all these things that like the web was growing up at the time, and we were learning it in school. I remember some of our classes were like the teacher didn't know how to teach it. And the teacher was like, "Hey, has anybody figured this thing out?" And one of the students would be like, "Oh, I did this yesterday." Like the class was teaching itself because that's
Wow.
just, there were no textbooks at the time. There was like one or
Mhm.
two. So we had to figure it out from like tutorials and books and messing around. And, that's how we learned how to do it. So for me, I can tie that back to my love of drawing. It was just the evolution of that. That's like, I wanted to make stuff. I wanted to make images, and I wanted to make art, or which then turned into design, which I don't know the difference between the two. Like it just
Mhm.
kind of evolved very gradually from my love of drawing and comics and movies and entertainment to wanting to make that stuff, and then eventually being a designer.
What about business? Like, when did that jump into the picture?
So I got a couple of internships in college, which I was just happy to be there. A bunch of unpaid internships. My first internship, they paid me my train ticket one way, so it's like I
Oh,
still got to
wow.
pay. The poor college kid, I had to pay my way back, but they pay my way there. And one internship turned into another, and turned into another. And I remember working in an agency. They were all at interactive agencies. I remember working in an agency and getting a project, and I remember the project lead saying, "Okay, Dan, you got to make 10 wireframes." And I was like, why? And he's like, I don't know. That's what we agreed to in the contract. And I'm like, well, why do we do that? Like, to me, I'm like, this is a small site. I don't even think it's going to have 10 pages on the site. Why do we have to make 10 wireframes? And I remember that idea just being like, who picked that? And then I like went on a search, like, who picked this thing? And it turns out it was a sales guy. And I was like, hey, why did you pick 10 wireframes? And he's like, I don't know, because that got us to the budget that we needed to. And I'm like, yeah, but the site doesn't need 10 wireframes. It needs like 6 at most. And he was like,
Right.
yeah, but it's the budget that matters. Figure it out, kid. And I was like, oh, okay. So you get to decide that kind of stuff on the business side of this. I need to learn how to get into that room. So I started reading our contracts. Like I asked my boss, I was like, can I read through the contract? And he'd be like, all right. So I'd read through the contract. Why did we decide this? Where did this come from? Oh, well, we decided that on the sales call. Well, can I sit in on the sales call? So I sat on the sales call. Well, why did you say that thing in the sales call? Right. And I started to get more involved because I didn't want to be handed things and be like, you just got to do this thing. I'm like, well, it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why we're doing this. So I learned that the earlier I get involved in the process, the more ability I have to shape the decisions that we make. And that started my love of like, okay, if that stuff gets shaped on the business side, whatever that means, well, I want to be involved in the business side. Because to me, it's still a form of design. It's still a way that I get to shape the outcome of a thing, which is what I think design is. So that kind of started my curiosity quest into like, all right, well, let's get involved in more of the business stuff so that I could actually do good design work because I'm not set up to fail.
Oh, that's very courageous to just ask your boss if you can read the like, you had no fear then.
I'm lucky to work in cultures where that was fine. Maybe it was just naivete. It could have been that as like I was a kid, who knows? Um, but I also was lucky to work in cultures where it's like, it was fine to ask that stuff. Because the worst
Yeah.
that could happen is they would just be like, no. And I'd be like, all right. But nobody would get offended. Nobody was insulted. Nobody's like, how dare you ask that kind.
Right.
So I was lucky to work in places where it's okay to ask a question to get and to give a no answer, and to give a yes answer. So I think that helped shape my adventurousness to be like, can I see that? Can I do that? Can I try this thing? Can I try that thing? And then yes, no, yes, maybe later, whatever. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll roll with it.
I do see the trend though. Being a kid, you were always asking those questions. The
Yeah,
curiosity got you there. And now as being an adult and getting older and doing things, the curiosity never died. It's still there.
totally.
So I can see why you're still successful. You're still making moves because of that.
Yeah, and for better or worse, it's my personality too. It's like for
Right.
those who are into personality
Mhm.
tests and whatever, I'm an Aquarius, I'm an INTJ, I'm Enneagram 5. If you know about all those things, all of those are people who are curious and who are world builders and people who are
Mhm.
like always poking at things. So that's how I was born. Nature and nurture. I encourage that.
So now you went through all these things, you went to school, you're building things, and you started super friendly. And I hear that your backup plan was to move into your parents' basement with your newborn if it
Yeah.
didn't work out. Who
Yeah.
was your wife a part of that plan because you guys were close?
Oh, I think it was my wife's plan. I'll verify
Oh,
that with her
wow.
later, but I think that she suggested it, because I never wanted to run my own business. What I did want was the ability to spend as much time as I can get with my wife and my newborn daughter at the time. And I was working at an agency, which I loved working at. I love that agency. I love the work. I love the people, like everything about it. What I didn't love was the hours. What I
Right.
didn't love was like, I had an hour train ride to work in the morning and an hour train ride back, and I worked a long day. And so I'd be gone, 12, 15 hours of the day. And it's like, I didn't want to see my kid for 5 minutes in the morning and then 5 minutes in the night. And my wife said it to me one day. She was just like, is that the kind of dad you want to be? I was like, no way.
Mm.
And she's like, well, what's going to change then? This was 2012. So at the time, there was no such thing as like remote work, right? There was no such thing as like, well, some people can work from home. It's like, no, everybody went into the office at that time.
Mhm.
Right.
So I just felt that like it was rude of me to say, hey, I know everybody else is coming in for like 12 to 15 hours a day, but like, could I just work for like 6 hours a day? And like, would that be
Mhm.
fine? I just didn't see how they would say yes to that. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have asked. I didn't ask, because who knows? But I thought the best way for me to have the time that I want with my family is to start my own thing where I can make my own rules. And if that means that I make less money, well, that's okay if we could figure out a way to live with less money. And so as we brainstormed about it, it was like, how could we live without less money? Well, we don't have a New York apartment to rent, which was expensive.
Mhm.
Maybe we could live in the suburbs of Philadelphia in my parents' basement, and my parents aren't going to kick us out. Starting a business, like that's one way to control rent. Luckily, we didn't have to
Right.
do that, because there's a lot of good circumstances that came together. But that was the plan. The plan was like, all right, keep expenses as low as possible, and the way to do that is just to not have a rent payment or a mortgage payment. And that was our best idea as to how to do that at the time.
I'm curious, did you kind of take any of that legal, the business stuff from your internships into your business? Like that's kind of tough, figuring that part out, especially as a young entrepreneur. You kind of got to make mistakes first. What was that journey like?
100%, I took a lot of that stuff. I mean, literally took a lot of that stuff. Like every job that I left, I'm like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
save all this stuff to my hard drive, and then I'm gonna make my own version of it. So yes, yes, I did that. The other part too is one of my superpowers is that I'm not the kind of person who only learns from their own mistakes. Like I learn from other
Mhm.
people's mistakes and successes too. I'm
Mhm.
able to observe how people do things well and poorly, and then formulate my own version of it. I'm pretty good at discernment. So part of the luck that I have had is I've been part of agencies and been part of starting those agencies, even though I wasn't a founder or co-founder, but I was one of the founding members of a few agencies. So I got to see them
Mhm.
start up. And I remember I had one boss that I remember him losing 30 pounds in 2 weeks because he
Mhm.
was stressed about payroll. And I was like, okay, like lesson to me is if I ever have my own agency, which I wasn't planning at the time, but if I
Mhm.
ever have my own, I don't want to be stressed out about payroll to the point where I lose 20 pounds, 30 pounds
Right.
in 2 weeks because that seems unhealthy. That seems like a thing
Mhm.
that I don't want to go through. So I need to build a model that allows me to dodge that problem. Right. And later on, what that eventually turned into was a super friend model where we had all contractors and I was the only full-time employee, but I still ran
Mhm.
it like full-time teams. So it's like that lesson came from being at that agency, watching how that worked, and then deciding I don't want to do it that way. I worked at other agencies where it's like, I love the way that our teams run. So I'm going to adopt that dynamic. As an example, I worked at an agency where every team had a team name and a team identity, and every team made swag for themselves, like all that stuff. It's like, oh, I like that. I'm going to take that. So we had that at SuperFriendly. So it's like I was able to kind of piece together all of the different things. It's like I like that, I like this, I like that thing. I don't like that. I'm going to discard that. And I'm a believer in everything's a remix. So it's like I was just remixing all the stuff that I saw. I didn't invent anything in particular. I was just trying to take the things that worked for me and keep them, and then discard the things that didn't work for me.
So at this point, you were kind of getting a lot of knowledge and you built an apprenticeship. At what point did you start kind of giving back and starting the educator role as well as your agency?
I wish that I could pinpoint like a specific point, but like it all kind of converged a bit. I've always been, for better or worse, a teacher, an educator, a sharer. I identify as a sharer more than a teacher or an educator. I think teaching and educating is a form of sharing, but sharing is the core thing for me. When I have stuff, I want other people to have it too. If I have a plate of food, I share my food all the time. If you come out to eat with me, we're sharing food. We're gonna order tapas style, and then I'm like, oh, we're gonna split it all. I like doing that. I like having that experience. I like sharing that experience with other people. So I remember at one of the earliest agencies that I worked with, we got an intern. Like one day, an intern showed up. I was looking around, and I was like, no one is in charge of this intern. Why did we bring this intern in? And it was just like, the agency owner thought that it was the right thing to do. Like, yeah, we should have interns. And then all of a sudden, drop this intern in the middle of our work. It's like, well, does she have a seat? Like, where's she gonna sit?
On
Does
the
she have a
floor.
computer? Right? It's like
Yeah.
we had no process around that. So I
Mhm.
was
Right.
like, all right, well, I'll show her a couple of things that I'm working on. Cause who else is gonna do that? Cause I was
Right.
thinking if I was in her spot, I would feel super awkward. Like I would be like, what do
Yeah,
I
I
do here?
agree.
So I was like, hey, come sit next to me. I'll show you some stuff. And she was like, all right. So it's like I've always done that, not because it was my job, but because I like doing that. I like doing
Mhm.
that for people. So that was like years before I started my own agency. I didn't start an apprenticeship in order to start an apprenticeship. The reason I started, and this goes back to the house story. My parents actually started a business. They started a personal care home for my grandparents when my grandparents were
Oh,
getting
wow.
older.
Mhm.
And then as after my grandparents passed away, they sold that business, but they still had the house because it was 2008 housing crisis and couldn't sell
Mhm.
houses. So they had this property that was just sitting around. They had it for 3 or 4 years. And then in 2012, when my wife and I were like, we were about to pitch my parents on moving into their basement. We came up for Christmas. We were living in New York at the time, came back to Philly for Christmas, celebrate with my parents and her parents. And before even pitching him this idea, my dad was like, you have any ideas what we could do with this property that we have? Like, we can't sell it right now. No one's buying houses. Like, do you have any, like, do you have like friends who need like a cheap house? And we're like, we can think of somebody. Um, so basically, he was like, I mean, if he, we're like, we're thinking about moving back, and he was like, if you want that house, you can just take over the mortgage because like no one's paying for it right now anyway. So if you just
Mhm.
take over the mortgage payments, there's like, probably like 30 grand left on the mortgage payments. Like it's yours. The house is not in great shape, so you'd have to figure that out. So my brother-in-law, he is the kind of person who has just worked a new job every year. He like managed a 7-Eleven one year, and then he was like a roofer one year, and then he built pools one year. And he had a girlfriend at the time. He lived with his mom, was my wife's mom. And he said to me, like, I'm tired of being this like I have a new job every year. Do you think you could teach me how to be a web developer? And I
Mm.
was like, yeah. And he was like, if you do that, I would renovate your house for you. Like I'll bring my friends, we'll redo everything. So they did demolition, they did new floors, they put up new drywall, they did all this stuff. We
Wow.
moved in, and then he became my first apprentice. I wasn't thinking about it as an apprenticeship. I was just like, I'm just helping out my brother-in-law. And I was like, hey, just come every day, come to the office. The office was my spare bedroom in our house, which he
Mhm.
helped build. Come to the office, get a laptop. I'll teach you how to write some code. And then every day he came and I would give him larger and larger project. Hey, here's a book that you should read about CSS. Here's here's a little bit of a project. Yeah, I want you to build the footer on this project that I'm on. So like every day, just giving them slightly larger things to do. And 9 months in, it was like, hey, I think you have enough that you could build a portfolio and I can introduce you to some agency owners in town. You can start shopping around, see if you can get a job. And he was like, all right. So he did that, landed a job, and I was like, I think that's a curriculum for a 9-month apprenticeship. And then the drummer of my band was like, hey, I saw what you did with your brother-in-law. Like, could you teach me how to do that? I'm like, yeah, sure. So come hang out with me every day. Same thing. I wasn't like, I would like to build an apprenticeship. And then I built one. It was like, no, I'm just trying to help out my friends and my family.
Oh,
And
wow.
I have this thing that I can share with them. And then more and more people rolled through. And eventually, by the time I shut it down, I think I had like maybe 25 or something like that apprentices that had gone through it.
So bartering is real. It seems like the beauty of having that family relationship is that it's not about money anymore. It's about kind of mutual learning. But you did mention a band. What? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, so I played music my whole life. I played music when I started playing the keyboard piano when I was 3. And I remember when I was growing up, I used to carry a little Casio keyboard with me to church every week. I have it tucked under my arm, and every week the pastor would say to me, "Hey Dan, you want to come up to the front and play us a song?" And I'd be like, "Yep." Then I'd march to the front and I'd play a song on my keyboard, and then I'd march back down. So I'm used to being on stages. I don't have
Mhm.
a lot of stage fright. It's comfortable for me. So I played the piano for a long time. I played in church a lot. How my wife and I actually re-met after high school. We dated for a little bit, and then we went to separate schools, so we stopped dating. And then in college, how we re-met was my wife was she's an incredible singer. She was singing worship at a church that I just happened to be visiting that week, and they didn't have a
Oh.
pianist. And she was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I'm like, coming to visit." She's like, "You want to play piano for us?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I played piano for them. And then after that, we went out for lunch. And then we stayed out from lunch. And then we went out to dinner. And then we saw a movie. And then we went bowling. And then the rest is history.
That's disgustingly romantic. I'm like
Yeah. So yeah, music is a big thing, in our background, in our history, mine as well. And so I played in a band. I played in a Christian band for 10 years. And then I stopped doing that because we all grew up and had kids and, all that stuff. And actually, the lead singer of the band, he does gigs every now and again. He's like, "Hey, you want to play tonight?" I'm like, "Sure." But music I think it's just another form of artistry, that I love. It's like basketball, not good enough to be a professional musician, but I enjoy doing it. So whenever a friend will call, like, "Hey, you want to do some music?" I'll do some music.
Eric was in a Christian rap group
Oh,
too.
yeah?
Oh my God. That's a different story. We shouldn't even mention
Okay,
that.
I'll hit you up about that later. We'll talk about that later. I'm sure there's a story there. I wanna hear about that.
But I did want to stay on super friendly because I know that over 700 freelancers passed through super friendly over the years. And a lot of times us being involved in some of the things that we do in helping people, because I love to help people as well. You tend to remember some of those people. Like, hey, I helped this person achieve X, Y, and Z. And you'll have things like, oh, well, they didn't do so great. So is there someone that stuck out in your head that actually didn't get to a certain part that they wanted to get to in life and that you still think about that you wish you could have did more for?
Many, many. And now I'm realizing you asked a question earlier about failure. I'm like, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what failure. No, now I'm failure to me is letting people down, especially
Mhm.
people that I made a promise to or feel like I made a promise to. I'm like, yeah, there's a bunch of people I let down, a bunch, and to this day, sometimes I think about them daily. Like it
Yeah.
just depends on the day. But there's a ton of people that I wish I could have done more for and more with. There's a ton of people that I mismanaged and I just didn't do well by them. Some intentionally, some unintentionally. Some I only realized in hindsight, some I realized in the moment. With that many people who have come through under my care, it's my company. There's a bunch of people that I'm sure hate my guts right now. There's a bunch of people that have said to me that being part of Super Friendly has changed their lives. There's a bunch of people that have not said to me, but probably were like, that dude is trash.
Mm.
And so just with that many people coming through, there's bound to be a lot of that. And
Of
I
course.
I don't regret, any of them, but I'm sad about every single one.
What did you learn in those times, like, as a leader when you
Oof.
felt like can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so a couple of stories. There are some people that have come through that I just didn't set good expectations for them or with clients. So as an example, with the apprenticeship in particular, we've gotten fired from clients because the client did not appreciate that the apprentice presented the work.
Oh,
Mm.
interesting. Yeah.
That's my fault. I could have
Mhm.
set expectations better on all the ends of that.
Mhm.
Um, I've had apprentices basically not do the thing that they could have been incredible at because that experience was so jarring for them.
Mm.
Like it's trauma.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my fault. Like that's on me for not preparing them for that, for not preparing the client for that experience. Like that's my job as a leader that I didn't do well.
Mm.
We've had a bunch of different situations with the agency where we found out we were working for a client that not everybody would like to work for them once they found that out. We've had clients who have been written up in national newspapers for the way that they mismanaged their team,
Mhm.
for things like bad hiring practices,
Yeah.
right? And then they're a current client. And my team is like, what are we doing about that? Like,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what to do about that. That's the first time I've done it. So what do I do about this? Call on all hands, call my core team together. You still got to make a tough decision about that.
Mhm.
Hey,
Right.
we're going to continue to work with this client. We're going to not continue to work with this client. If we don't work with this client, what happens to the money that all the people were expecting from working on this job?
Mhm.
Do I still
Yeah.
pay it out? Do I not pay it out? Are they cool with that? What happens if we stay with this client and the people who are working on this account are no longer aligned with this account? Those are really tricky situations that I was not prepared for. I don't know
Right.
how you can prepare for those things. Even now, like today, this is, years later, a decade later, like I still don't know what I would do about that. I still don't know if I made the right choice. I still had to make a choice about it. I'm aware that those things happen in the world, but they happen to other people. They happen to big corporations and they happen to
Yeah.
CEOs and they happen to,
Mhm.
they don't happen to small agencies, but
Right.
like they happen to me. So there's a ton of those kind of situations that I'm like, I try to do the best that I can there. There's a ton of people who are like visibly hated the decisions that I made about those things, and
Yeah.
told me to my face. And I'm like, I respect it. I respect that their opinion, and I respect my own. And it's a hard situation. So there's a
Right.
lot of stuff like that. 10 years of running an agency. There's 3 lawsuits. That's
Oh,
that's a
wow.
fun thing, right? It's like
Oh,
like
wow.
Um,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Building entire business models. COVID. What
yeah.
Oh,
happens when all your clients cancel in one day? What happened? Our largest client at the time was United Airlines.
Mhm.
United Airlines. And then all of a sudden, a global
Yeah.
pandemic basically says the future of the travel and tourism industry is TBD.
yeah.
Those are really tough situations. And I think that in some of those situations, I and we um, did the best we could and didn't do a good job. And in some of those situations, I and we did the best that we could and we did an excellent job. And there's a range of those things. And also, depending on who you ask, they will say that the things that I thought were excellent were not, and they will say the things that I thought were not excellent, they were. My leadership ability was definitely tested in that time. And I think that I grew from it. And I think it sucks that some of those things that I grew from were at the expense of other people.
You're carrying a lot of weight on your shoulders. That's a
Yeah.
lot, you know. Did you have a mentor or anyone you could talk to about it?
I've been very lucky to have many mentors. When I hear about people who are like, I've never had a mentor, I'm like, I feel the most sad about that because
Mm.
I'm really lucky that I had a lot of people that I could call, text, hey, can you have lunch with me about this thing? I don't know what to do about it. People who I've worked for and with 20 years ago that'll still have lunch with me today if I have a question. I'm really lucky to have that. And I still want more. I wish I had more of that. But I'm really lucky to have a lot of those people in my life, who can counsel me on a lot of that kind of stuff.
Definitely need the support. I mean, especially going through things like that. Now, I'm gonna fast forward. You shut down Super Friendly after 10 years, right? You and Emily had to cut expenses, dip into savings. Tell us about that time.
It's tough. Super Friendly was the best job that I've ever had, if only for the fact that it was mine. Like warts and all, but it was mine.
Mhm.
Right.
So I got to make the rules and I got to do it the way that I wanted to, and still ended up with being able to work with some of the best clients I could ever imagine, work with a bunch of my friends, build something that was fun to me and exciting. Like, it's an incredible job. And not to mention, paid really well. I'm pretty transparent about my salary. I have it on my website, like all that stuff,
Mhm.
like all the money that I've made, paid more than I ever imagined I would ever make in my life. And then I walked away from it like a dummy. Literally that's what everybody else said. Luckily, my wife understood, and
Mhm.
and that was not a decision that I made on my own.
Mhm.
My wife and I, for better or worse, and I think for better, like, we really prioritize the life that we want to live and chase that pretty relentlessly. And like we're pretty aligned on that, and we have been for as long as I've known her. Like, that's one of the things that's the strongest about our relationship is how aligned we are on that. And so when one of us is like, I needed to go do this thing, it's never like, well, hang on a sec, let's like, it's like, no, go do the thing. We'll figure it out. Like, that's the default. We'll figure it
Yeah.
out. We'll figure that out. We always have. So with me going like, this is no longer a thing that I want to do because it's good and I've done it and I'm ready to do the next thing. She's like, cool, go find the next thing. We'll figure it out. Part of what we had to figure out was like, so where are we going to get money from? What are we going to do? How are we going to afford all of our expenses? What can we cut? What can we make more of? What can we do? Right. And constantly in that time period, and sometimes even to today, that was 2022, I shut it down. So the past 4 years, even to today, is like, should we sell our house? Should we sell our cars? Should we sell our kids? It's like, I'm just kidding. It's like, what can we cut? What can we move? What can we change? What can we, like, what maneuvering room do we have in this thing to be able to live the life that we want to live? And what sacrifices are we willing to make because of that? In order to do those things. And that's one of the things that I love about our life and the way that we work together is that, like, it has always been an adventure, and we
Mhm.
embrace the adventure. Our family values that we have, my kids know it. We have 3 family values. It's adventure, creativity, and integrity. Right. So we're constantly asking each other, like, how are we living those 3 things? What are we doing about those 3 things? How are we being creative? How are we being adventurous? How are we having integrity around the things that we do? And those are things that we try to hold each other accountable for in those things. So tough times for sure, continues to be tough times, in all that. Last year, I liquidated my 401k because it was like, I believe in the business that I'm running right now. I just need time and runway to build it. It's like, I can go get an investor, but you know who invests first? I can.
Mm.
It's like, so
Yeah.
like, that's the last of our savings. That's the last of that. So now what do we do? Right. There's a lot of those things, but I think we are both risk takers. We're not foolish risk takers. At least I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Mhm.
But we take risks on the things that we believe in, and so far so good. So far those things have paid off, but those are scary to do in the moment.
I have to go back. I've been wanting to ask this, you're running this business and you're a parent, a husband, but you mentioned that your grandparents passed and they're the ones that were living with you in the house. That's a lot of grief you have to deal with working on your business. How did you navigate that? Did you pause or what happened there?
Yeah. So I was unclear about the timing of it. So my grandparents passed away long before I started Super Friendly.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Um,
Okay.
But that's not to say that there weren't grieving activities throughout the whole thing. I had to grieve the loss of my company,
Yeah.
right? It's a loss. Like anytime there's a loss, there's grief that comes with it.
Right.
So like I was doing a thing for 10 years and then I wasn't.
Mm.
It's like I had to grieve that too. And I think that I'm over the grieving of that too. But that's definitely a loss. Like I said, I loved it. I loved it. I loved running that company. It was fun. And I was happy to do it. And I was grateful to have the chance to do it. And also I was done with it.
Mm.
So like part of my grieving process, I've learned this. This is interesting. Part of my grieving process is I get tattoos. I have this
Oh, that's
tattoo.
so
Right?
Oh, wow.
I have this tattoo
Do you
because
design them?
I don't design them.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think I can design tattoos. I don't design stuff for myself because I'm too close to it. But like
Oh.
this tattoo that I just showed you is my grandfather had that tattoo.
Oh,
And so
wow.
after he passed away, my brother and I, we found an artist who would reinterpret that. There's the big snake on it, so we found an artist who does snakes. And my brother and I got the tattoo together. So we have the same one. That we both got together. When I shut down Super Friendly, I got a Super Friendly tattoo. I have a
Oh,
Super Friendly
wow.
tattoo right now.
Oh,
But
wow.
like to me, it memorialized it. It's like
Yeah.
after like I need a closure symbol of that, and that's the closure symbol for me. I think about my grandfather every day. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to not think about him every day. So when I look at my arm, I think of my grandfather. I'm like, that's great. I love it. I love thinking about my grandfather. I think about Super Friendly every day. I still talk about it all the time on LinkedIn, to my students. So when I coach, like I share a lot of stuff about it. I get to think about Super Friendly every day, even though I sold it. I shut it down and I sold it. It literally is someone else's right now, but that version was mine. They have a
Right.
different version, right? And they're doing something else with it. And I'm a board member of that. And I love that. And it's awesome. The other version, Super Friendly, was mine. And I celebrate that. And I grieve that. And it was a loss. And I got angry about it. And I got depressed about it. I got all that stuff, and now it's with me every day too, right? It's on my
Right.
body. I don't regret thinking about it every day when I look at that. So
Mm.
I guess that's part of my grieving process too. And there's been a bunch of things in those 10 years, family, death, separation, like all that stuff that I think to me, one of the great things about running a business is that I can say, I'm going to go take 2 weeks off because I need to go figure this thing out. And luckily, especially with Super Friendly, having a team around me of people go like, cool, see you in 2 weeks. Like that's awesome. And you come back in 2 weeks and things are fine or things are better than when you left. Like that's incredible. So I think one of the things about running a company is just the ability to do that. The ability to go like, I need to go take care of myself for a while. Next week, I'm taking 2 days off to go shoot photos of cherry blossoms because it's cherry blossom season. It's like, if I can't do that, what's the point of running a company?
Right. Go
Right.
back to corporate.
I'll just go get somebody else to pay me a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Why work this hard?
Yeah, I feel you. I want to ask, you went from $9,600 a year to nearly 3 million in business revenue. At what point did the money stop being about survival and start being more about something else?
I think there's a stat about this, and it lines up with kind of where it was for me. It's like it's somewhere in the like $80,000 to $100,000 range. That amount per year is like okay. So I'll say for me personally, there's probably 2 or 3 of those plateaus. So that was one. I remember my first job, I got paid $10 an hour, and then I think my second job where I became full time or part time, something like that. I think I made like $32 an hour, something like that. So it was like, I was a kid, I was in college, all I had to pay for was my apartment and food, so it's like I didn't have that many expenses. And I remember hitting the job where it was like $56,000 a year. And I was like,
Mm.
yes, like that felt really good.
Right.
I felt like I'm a grown up now.
Right.
I'm making $50,000 a year, because I think part of it was in the range that like, some people don't make $56,000 a year ever.
Right.
Work their whole lives. They don't make that. So that felt really good. Like I've surpassed something, that like, okay, I've arrived somewhere. And then in the $70,000 to $100,000 range around that too. And I think the statistic is something like that like past $70,000 a year has nominal effect on happiness generally. I forget where that's from, but I've heard that before. It was a little bit different for me in that range because at that time we lived in New York. So $80,000 in New York goes a little bit less far than $80,000 a year would go somewhere else.
Right.
So it was less felt, I think, but even that range was like, that felt really good. And then I think the next range after that was like 350. So 350 for me was like, this is very different. You get
Right.
to do a lot of things and not worry about stuff. Me 350 is like, "Wanna fly business class? Let's do it." It's not an important decision at that point, which feels very privileged to be able to say, but it's like, "Nah, we can absorb that." Those are the plateaus for me where that became the thing. I do remember that at every stage of my business, I hit plateaus until I can figure out what I would use the extra money for. It's like, I don't know what the coincidence is. I don't know what the metaphysical whatever is, the universe or God or whatever it is. Like, I don't know what it is, but I remember with SuperFriendly, I was stuck, at a certain level of revenue. I think we were at like 400, no, it was like 600K, something like that, right? Which is the revenue of the company, not my take home, but
Mhm.
the revenue of the company around that level until I officially decided that if we made more money, I would spend it on apprenticeship. And that's when I officially made apprenticeship a thing. And as soon as I decided that, more revenue came in. I don't know what it
Got
was.
it.
It's like it had a job now. So now I was looking for the money for something, not just like money for the sake of money. Cause for that, it's like, whatever, you just waste it. For me in my journey, those were the different plateaus that I think were meaningful.
So just to jump a little bit ahead now, you're running Make More Money. You're coaching agency owners how to scale to $1 million and beyond here. And I would like to know, like, one of the most common things you see agencies get wrong that keeps them kind of stuck. I think our listeners will appreciate that.
Oh, so many. Where to start? Um, okay, so a couple of like myths, a couple of misconceptions. Um, I think one of the misconceptions is that once you hit a certain threshold, it's because you had things figured out. And what I know from my own experience, but now coaching many, many agency owners, it's like, oh, it's definitely reinforced, anecdotally, is that some of the students in my program hit 1 million and they're a mess. Some of the students in my program hit 2.5 million and they're a mess. Some of the students in my program hit 3.5 million and they're a mess.
Oh, interesting.
Which is a thing that I think that the normal human, if you had asked me 12 years ago, I would have been like, if you had 200,000 or 2 million, you probably got some stuff figured out. And that's true. You probably have some stuff figured out, but you don't have it all figured out.
Right.
You know, you can hit 10 million and not have it all figured out. And I think that there's like a mindset shift in that like at every stage of business, there are problems. So what we're trying to do is just upgrade problems. We're not trying to solve everything.
Mhm.
Hopefully your problems at 1 million are better at 2 million. Right? You
Mm.
have better problems, but you still have problems. There's still stuff to
Yeah.
fix. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's one thing that I think a lot of people are surprised by because nobody paints the path for you. Nobody says, hey, when you hit 2 million, you're going to hit a bottleneck here and there. There are a few people who are doing that. And those are people that people follow a lot. Alex Hormozy, says a lot about that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of people on social media who are now starting to expose that idea because they've been there. And I think that's why a lot of people follow them and want to hear that because they're on that cusp. So I think that's one big thing is just kind of debunking that myth. If you could figure it out, then you'll get to 2 million. No, no, no. You could stumble your way into 2 million. I've
Right.
seen it done before. Like, and it's okay. It's fine to do that. Okay. A couple of things that I think agency owners get wrong is they try to keep themselves in the business for longer than they should.
Oh God, I don't like hearing that.
I mean, a lot of us started businesses as practitioners, right? Like we came from being a designer, or an engineer, or a writer, or whatever it is our craft was, and we started a business, and we tied the business to ourself, and then we
Mm.
can't get out of it. And a lot
Mm.
of times it's you can't get out of it because you can't get out of it, but a lot of times you can't get out of it because you didn't get yourself out of it. You actually can right now, but most
Mm.
people don't know how to do that. They don't know when to build the playbooks. They don't know when to hire. Last year, I was invited to a mastermind, and I sat next to a person who had three $30 million exits from his company. And I was like, dude, what advice can you share with me? What do you got? And he said, spend the money. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not making a lot. He's like, spend the money. He's like, most people spend the money too late. And I'm gonna go
Right.
spend it on what? He's like, whatever it is that's blocking you. Spend money on ads if you need more sales. Spend money on a team if you're bottlenecks. Like whatever it is, spend the money. Figure it out a way to get the money, get a loan, get an SBA loan, get a bank loan, raise a friends and family, whatever it is, borrow money. Like as long as it's not unethical or illegal or whatever, get the money, spend the money, it'll come back to you. Like, dang, okay. Like, I mean, this is a guy who sold 3 companies. I don't know if he's the best dude in the world. I don't know him, but I know that he's sold 3 companies. So, and that's his advice. So I'm like, okay, let me take that under consideration. Thanks for that advice. So I think that for a lot of people who aren't doing $30 million, so people who are running agencies who are making 250, 400, 500, 600, like that sounds like making a lot of money, but 400,000 is a trap. Because 400,000 in revenue probably means your take home is 250, minus taxes, minus all that stuff. It's like you're barely making more than you would be making if you were working for somebody else, and you're probably working 60, 70 hours a week. You're done. You got no more room. So what do you do? And most people are like, well, I got here by just working harder, but I don't have any more hard work to give. So what do I do now? Right? They're stuck. And it's because they probably could have hired earlier. They probably could have systematized some stuff a little bit earlier. A lot of it is when you have the job of a business owner, you're no longer designer or creative director or engineer or builder or anything like that. You're a CEO. You got to act like a CEO now.
Right.
And the ones who can't make that transition becomes really tough. The ones that can make that transition, even though it's clumsy, even though it's still tough, even though there's still problems, they start to see the potential for their business and what it could be. And usually that thing is about a larger thing in the world that they want to see happen. It's not about building more websites or building more apps or doing this AI thing or doing that. It's usually something else in the world that's a little bit bigger than what their company does or what products they sell. It's usually something else in the world that they want to see change. And they start to like zero in on that and go like, that's what I want to do. And like that has given me renewed focus.
So, given this information within this program that you have, what would you say would be one of the hardest conversations you had to have with someone?
It depends on their stage. So part of what I teach is I have 6 phases that I teach,
Okay.
of different phases that people are in their agency. There's one phase called the cash reserve building phase. I forget who said this to me. Every agency is 90 days away from going out of business.
Mm.
At some point in your business, the point is just to stay alive. So get cash. Doesn't matter how. And I think a lot of people it's too precious to them. No. Well, I want to make money by doing this specific thing. Yeah, but bro, nobody's buying that. Do anything else. I tell people this, and this comes from my dad. I remember my dad saying this to me and to my friends. It's like my dad said growing up, if you need money, sweep the streets.
Hmm.
What's the equivalent today? If you need money, go drive for Uber.
Right. Right.
Go work at Burger King. Go mow your cousin's lawn. And most people are too proud to do that. If you need money, go get money. That's what keeps companies alive. Like cash is the lifeblood of your company. And most people are too proud to get it in certain ways. And it's like, nope, go make money. If you gotta babysit, go babysit. And people don't like to hear that.
Yeah.
It's too humble.
I like that. I like that. Humbles you real quick,
Yeah.
if you really want that business to work,
Yeah. How bad do
go
you want
get
it?
the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go get the
I like
money.
that.
Go babysit if you need. Go drive Uber. There's no shame in it. You feel shame around it. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in collecting money to keep your business alive if it's important to you. If you want to make it happen, go make it happen. It's going to be a great story on a podcast someday when you're successful. Do that. Right now, it sucks. It sucks. If you believe in it that much and you know it's going to be a success, and what you need to do today is drive for Uber, go drive for Uber. It's fine. Go collect the cash. You keep your business alive for an extra month. It's important. So that's the one thing, that a lot of people don't hear. Then later on, what a lot of people don't like to hear is that they are doing the wrong work. So especially for CEOs, I just did a retreat for my top students. We went to Belize for a week. The point was to write and craft 10-year visions for their agencies. We ended up writing 50-year visions on average.
Oh, wow.
50-year?
50-year.
That's a
50.
lot. It's a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We wrote a 50-year vision for one of my students who went 50 years. And even that was like, well, 50 years is actually the time that he would die. That's actually not the vision for the entire company. It's just the
Okay.
vision for while he's alive.
Oh,
Which is like, yo,
lifetime.
that's wild. Like, for him and for a lot of the students, it's like what you're working on today, what you're working on right now is the wrong thing. But it's hard to give that up, because you're so used to it. And for a lot of people, their identity is tied to that thing. That's what they grew up doing, or that's what they built the last 10 years of their business or the last 5 years of their business doing. That's what people know them as. That's the reputation that they have. So there's a lot of like identity stuff, in there. And one of the ways that I talk to my students about it is what you want to do is we want to expand the room of your potential. And there's 2 ways to expand a room. You can lower the floor or you can raise the ceiling. And ideally you do both. raising the ceiling to me is just being more creative about your business, right? And raising the ceiling, you can do that through coaching, you can do that through reading books, you can do that through attending conferences, you can do that through having a peer group, you can have that through mentorship, right? Those are all ways to raise the ceiling. How do you lower the floor? Therapy. Like,
Mm.
I don't touch therapy because I'm not a therapist.
Mm.
And I could go into dangerous territory by trying to be a therapist for people, even though sometimes I can give therapy, right? Like, so it's like that other side of lowering the floor. A lot of people, it's like we just talked about. The only reason their business isn't making money is because they're not willing to drive for Uber. There's no actual barrier. There's just an emotional barrier to that, right? Which is real.
Yeah.
Which is real.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about it. That's not about creativity. That's just about your willingness to do a thing, right? And those are things that you work with a therapist about, right? Because there's probably something blocking you.
Maybe
Right.
you're a terrible driver,
Maybe that. Maybe that, but some people don't even try, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
Right.
well, at least go drive one route and see,
Hey,
Yeah.
go see. Go
It's
try
great
it.
networking. It's great for networking, right?
right?
You meet all kinds of people.
Totally. You
Yeah.
get tax write-off for the mile. Like, there's a lot of
Right.
advantages for it. Like, you could rationalize it however you want, but for a lot of people, it's an emotional barrier to just be like,
It
no,
is.
I won't do that. It's
It is.
beneath me,
Yeah.
or whatever the barrier is. So I think those are the things of like, you're not doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing right now based on the phase that you're in for a lot of people, just because you're too proud. And
Yeah.
that's tough.
Yeah.
I identify with that. I say it like it's easy, but I know it's not easy.
I need to sit on that for a while. Before we end, I wanted to kind of jump back into, because you have your life, right? But then you got kids, you got the next kind of phase, right? What you're passing down. And I know you had started Great Job. I wanted you to touch on that. I know right now it's not your focus, but us being parents would love to hear about that and what your plan is for that in the future, if there is one.
Yeah, totally. So great job. I mentioned earlier, my wife and I have had like stops and starts of like things that we've done together that have worked or been not so good. And like the things that haven't worked are things where it's like, I'm in my zone of genius, but she's not, I'm working that, or she's in her zone of genius, but I'm not. So this is actually the first thing where we are both in the right places where we get to do what we like to do, want to do, are great at, and get to do it together. So Great Job is a parenting company that we started, basically to help parents understand how to raise kids better, and how they can create their own handbooks for raising kids. There's lots of books you can read about parenting. There's no shortage of that stuff. There's lots of influencers you can listen to and all that stuff. But what most people don't do is they don't design the way that they parent. They just parent the way that either they were parented, or they parent the way that the opposite way of their parented, right? And they don't think about what experience they want to create for their family. The way that it started for us, I don't have doors on my office. I do all of my calls in the open. That started with my apprenticeship, because I wanted my apprentices to hear, here's how I talk to clients on sales calls. Here's how I present. Here's how I do all that stuff, without having to like, hey, can I come in? So there were no doors on that. So I still have that in all my offices now. And there was one time where I was, with SuperFriendly, we did a thing. We had a ritual called the Superpowers meeting. And a Superpowers meeting was when we first start a project, because we were all freelancers. Sometimes that's everyone's first experience of meeting each other. I would introduce them to each other, and I would tell them, sometimes me, sometimes my executive producer, sometimes a managing director would go and tell each person why they were chosen for this project, and tell everyone in front of them what their superpowers are and what people could rely on them for. So it's like lots of culture building, lots of team building. Like that was mostly my role, at a certain point in running that company, because I wasn't working on projects anymore. So I was mostly just like building culture. So I did one of those meetings. They always go well. It's always like kind of kumbaya and rah rah for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I got off the call, and my wife was like, "That was really good," because she's listening. That was a really good meeting. I'm like, thanks. She's like, "Why don't you do that for our family?"
Oh, touche.
She's right. She was right. I was excellent at doing it for my teams. And I
Mhm.
never once thought to do it for the most important team that I have. So I was like, okay, challenge accepted. What would it look like for us to do that as a family? And it started our way. We do a thing. We're actually due this Saturday, called MFP, which is the Mall Family Party, which is our version of a family meeting. And it's designed. So we start to look at all the things that we could do as parents to go like, well, what experience do we need to design for ourselves and for our kids and for our family unit for us to operate as a great team? My youngest daughter, she's 12, and she knows like every time we start MFP, I go, hey, anybody want to kick off MFP? And she goes, yep. And I'm like, all right, you start. She goes, all right, MFP is a monthly meeting to make sure that we are living our best lives together. Who's living their
Aw.
best life, right? That's what it's for. But like, how many parents don't ever say that to their kids or even think that for themselves? So it's like we just started to look at all the things in our lives about how we parent and just started to share them. And the first stab at that was we made a podcast. So we have a season of the podcast out. It's an award-winning podcast. We won a few awards for it.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow.
That's
So it's
awesome.
out there.
What's it
Um,
called?
it's called the Great Job Podcast.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, and all that stuff. And we have a small but loyal following. It's on pause right now because I'm working with agency owners, spending my time doing that. Also, because my wife went back to school. But at some point, we will probably pick it back up because it's an important thing to us because it's a thing that we get to do to affect our family, and then ideally other families too.
Well, Dan, you gave us a lot of good nuggets here. I really appreciate it. Any last words for our listeners before you get out of here?
I think what we started with is a good full circle moment, which is that I think that everyone can be a designer, and that doesn't mean drawing, pushing pixels on a screen. I think it means just looking at the situations and the environments that you're in and going like, how could this be better for the people involved? And that could be your family, that could be your team, your coworkers, your neighborhood, your community, your basketball league, whatever it is. I love encouraging people to just look at that stuff and go like, what's a way that you can make something better? You want to be the person who sweeps up? Be the person who sweeps up. That's cool. That's a way to help. And I think that starts from looking at your situation and going like, I can find a way that I could be involved in making this thing better. So I love encouraging people to do that. I love when people do that. And so please share your stories about that stuff and encourage everybody else to do that too.